Excellent. Okay. So let's go. I As I was thinking about what we would talk about this month, I was reminded of the old saying, "What goes up must come down." And so we started with that thought, and we went from there. So today we're calling it "What goes up," and then what else got inflated? What else did we see uh, happen out there in the marketplace? I thought I'd start with a thought for this year. I uh, I ran into this the other day, uh, and if you go ahead and read it, if organizational leaders are merely consistent, they risk rigidity. You get rigid in that consistency. In changing environments, they can struggle to adapt and may cling to old habits and practices until these practices become counterproductive, distracting them from the more important new work that needs to be done. But just as consistency can become rigidity, agility can become a lack of focus when it isn't tempered by consistency. So it's in the combination of consistency and agility that leaders become strategic. And this was from a gentleman named John Coleman, who was writing in Harvard Business Review. And I found this uh, instructive to me. Uh, I recognize as I looked out at my history, I knew a number of people who got consistent and then they became rigid and they resisted change. And because of that, they went the way of the buffalo and the ironclads. Um, at the same time, I've known people who were huge risk takers and they didn't do very well either. So it's the combination that allows us to look at things and become more strategic. So as you think about this year and your career and moving forward, think about this. Are you being too consistent or are you being too agile? And where do you want to come down? So that's our thought for the year. We pick up where we left off last year with the pandemic. Beginning of last year, we had 312.3 million cases globally. And as we started January of this year, we were at 668.7 million. So more than double. So we think that the pandemic's over, but it just doubled in the number of reported infections in the last year. So what's going to happen this year? Well, you'll notice that even though the numbers of infections doubled, the number of people who died only went up by 1 million, not even 800,000 reported deaths worldwide. So what does that say? Well, there were a lot more people that got sick, but not as many people died. In the US, we had 103 million, up from 62. So we had 40 million more. We weren't with the rest of the world. We were slower than the rest of the world in infection rates, but we had about 300,000 deaths. There were 7.23 million infections reported in Mexico at the beginning of this year against 4.3 when we started last year. But their reported death rate was only 31,000 above last year. So what we're seeing is there are a lot of people who are catching the virus, but we're doing a much better job at not losing those people through the various shots that we've all taken, or most of us have taken, and now the drugs that they can give you if you test positive, you can start taking drugs almost immediately that will reduce the amount. The thing that we're running into and seeing more is the long COVID infections. So it's still around. We're down to about 6% of those infected died in 2021, and that's down from 10%. I'm sorry, in 2022, down from 10% in 2021. So we've come a long way, but now we're seeing what they're calling long COVID, where people have different things, headaches and various manifestations of illness long after they're considered cured from the virus. So medical authorities still aren't sure what's causing that, and they're investigating. It'll be interesting when they find out what we'll find out. Someone had asked, and I had already gotten this data together, but when we get to the end and we start talking about things you wanted to know about, someone asked about freight rates. You can see by this graph that as we moved from December of previous year into February of this year, the quotes that we're getting for February transits are peaking back up a little bit. They came down at the end of December and through January, but now they're starting to peak up just a little. And so we'll have to see what happens with that. I think that the trend is going to be even further down. I'm not sure what caused that spot up, but I think that we'll see overall that it will come down. So what about the volumes? What's happening there? The volumes from China are going to be lower this year for several reasons. There's the fallout from Russia, Russian invasion of Ukraine, and China and Russia are setting up. Russia is buying weapons from China, and China is buying oil from Russia at a very reduced price. So that's going to affect our volume of trade with China. They've also opened up, if you haven't heard, China took away all restrictions because of COVID and immediately saw the numbers of infections in China jump. They're up somewhere around 10 million at this point. So a large part of the numbers that we're going to see for the rest of this year will be what happened in China. You've got 1.3 billion people, that's B with a billion with a B, and India now is pushing China. In fact, India claims that they now have the world's largest population at 1.4 billion. So that area of the world has almost 50% of the population of the world. So a lot of people crammed into that small geographic area. It's not tiny, but there's a lot of open spaces in the rest of Asia and in the other continents. So the fallout from Russia is having some impact on this, but the volumes were coming down from China anyway. If you remember back in 2020, 2021, the volumes coming out of China were extremely high, but a lot of that was for household goods. People were staying home, they were officing at home, so they outfitted an office and they bought office furniture for their home, or they decided, I'm not comfortable on this old sofa, let's get a brand new sofa. And so they were buying a lot of furnishings and things of that nature. That whole volume now has gone away and it won't repeat for a while. It's not like canned beans. You buy canned beans this week and you buy canned beans next week and the next week and the next week. You buy furniture, you're probably not looking forward to buying another house full of furniture for 8-10 years, depending on how antsy you get. Say, well, we could change. So a lot of the stuff that got bought in the early part of this decade won't be repeated. And so we'll see that volume come down. There are other products that are being made, and China has trade agreements now with other countries and is focusing on spending time, money, and products into Africa and into South America. So they're shifting their areas of focused sales away from the U.S. I just thought I'd share this with you in case you needed something to say, well, what else could go wrong? Oops. Some of the containers that the companies handle get weakened after a while. And when that happens, you're grabbing it by both ends and it bends in the middle. Oops. One of the other things that has fallen are fuel costs in some sectors, not all sectors. Diesel is lower, but it's still quite high compared to what it was in 2021, 2022, at the beginning of last year. And some of that is due to processing costs, because the crude oil that they're buying now is at a lower price. And that's interesting as well, because what happened was OPEC said that they were going to hold a higher price, but then Saudi Arabia dropped their price. And so if Saudi Arabia moves in a direction, then the rest of OPEC sort of goes with them. And they've started to come down. I had a discussion with some people in Saudi Arabia. One of the things that they pointed out is that the monarchy there has a plan, and we haven't heard a whole lot about it, but they've published large parts of it. They have a plan to get from 2023 to 2035, and by the time they get to 2035, they will be selling all kinds of products that are not oil-based, but will be working toward energy, solar energy, using the tides for generating energy, and they've got a bunch of initiatives working, and they're going to try and convert their economy away from petrol fuels and get into products that will be longer lived than petrol fuels at this point. So the question we have about fuel costs is, will this last? We saw them come down. For those of you who live on the west side, the Walmart on Paseo del Norte, at one point I filled up my tank and it was $2.38, I believe, a gallon. But it fluctuates, it goes up and down. So is this going to last? I think it'll last into the probably April, May timeframe, and then we'll see it go back up, because they'll be converting and shutting down refineries, and we'll have all of that cost that comes back in. But and depending on what happens with the war in Ukraine, if it continues and it grows, then that may have an impact as well. But at this point, there's a lot of oil out there in the marketplace, and so the crude oil prices are down, and it doesn't look like anybody's trying to push them back up. We haven't seen that at any rate. So trucking rates have also fallen, along with the over the sea rates. Trucking rates have fallen to a point that they're at cost. They're moving product at cost on some routes, and this is causing more and more trucking companies to fail. The small ones, the marginal ones, are going out of business at a fairly good clip. This started about third quarter of last year, and it's continuing. Will this last? Probably. There's not a lot of pressure at this point for the truck rates to go up. Once they've winnowed the field, they get rid of some of those small players, then I think you'll see the big guys will be in there and they'll be pushing the rates back up. Population. population, the Earth's population is now up over 8 billion people. But between China and India, they have almost 3 billion of that. That leaves 5 billion for the rest. And if you add Malaysia and some of the other Southeast Asian countries into that, almost 50% of the people in the world live on the India, China, Japan, Korea, that area of the world, in that part of Asia. But China had its first negative growth in population in 60 years in 2022. If you remember back, they had a one-child program that they put in place that limited families to one child. And that caused all kinds of problems because they were aborting fetuses if it was a girl, because they only wanted to have boys, and so on and so forth. That program has finally hit to the point that they're seeing negative growth. But now the US has been in negative growth for more than 20 years. So this isn't something that is just China. We've been on negative growth for more than 20 years. Europe has been in negative growth since World War II. What that means is couples get married and they have statistically less than 2 children. Some will have none, some will have 1, some will have 2 or more, but if the average is 2 or higher, then 2 is static and above 2 is population growth. Below 2 is negative growth. So we've been doing that, and you can see the impact of it here in the US. We've tightened down, regardless of what you hear on the news, we've tightened down on the number of people who can come into the country and work here. And by doing that, then we say, okay, it's just the people that are already here that can work. And we have 10 million openings for people to come and work, but we're not letting any people in. So we have shortages of labor. And that's creating some issues. We need to start bringing more people in to fill the jobs that are here, or we're going to see that as an impact on our overall growth. So how many will China have? Well, it hasn't really taken a huge impact yet, but if the trend continues, then they're going to be in the same position where they're going to have to bring people either from India or from Eastern Russia, and those places, Koreas, and move them into China as labor to meet the needs of the Chinese population. The other thing that everybody was screaming about was recession. The economy is falling, the economy is dropping. Well, a recession, and I think we covered this before, but just so everyone is familiar, a recession is a period of temporary economic decline during which trade and industrial activity are reduced, generally identified by a fall of GDP, gross domestic product, in 2 successive quarters. So when we look at the GDP for the US, Q4 of 2021 was 7. We had a 7% growth. Q1 of 2022 was minus 1.6, and Q2 was minus 0.2. So the minus 1.6 changed the market. If you're following the stock market, it went from being a bull market to a bear market. Bull market is growing, bear market is shrinking. And so in Q3 2022, we saw a positive growth to the GDP. And then in Q4, we saw another positive growth. So officially, Q4 marked the beginning of another bull market where the market is growing. So maybe we'll make back some of the money we lost in 2020 and 2021. So we won't have a technical recession, but what will we have? Well, Q4 is usually, we all bought Christmas presents. We all had Thanksgiving dinner. We probably had family in. My birthday was in there, and thank you all for sending me all of those wonderful presents. So my birthday not dominating this conversation, we had a lot of consumer spending, and so that drove the GDP and gave us a good end to 2022. Think about it for a second. Did you change your plans for Christmas? Did we were going to go see my wife's folks, or we were going to go see my husband's folks? And did you do that? What about your employees? Did they change, or did they say, you know what, we're doing okay. We'll have a good Christmas this year? Are they feeling the recession? And I think the answer for the most part is no. They're feeling the increase in the prices that we're paying at the store, but they're not feeling the impact of recession. The people that will feel this impact the most are the marginal, the people who are barely making it at this point. They're living on the margin. They're short, and they're close to broke most of the time. The needy people, the people that don't have a regular income, those are the folks that are getting hurt here. And we need to be aware. We need to keep those people in mind. And as we're planning our donations for the year, we need to look and see, where are those people? What are we doing for the local people, the food banks, and that kind of thing? So how will a recession affect you or your work? Well, if you're working for a major corporation in established supply chains, you might see some slight reductions in demand, and that'll vary. What's happening with electric cars? Are they going to sell more? Are they going to sell fewer? Well, depending on who you listen to, but cars are going to sell. So you're going to have cars, and all of those major supply chain products, they're going to continue to sell. The tech companies and startups, they're having a harder time. It's easier for customers to stop spending, and they have less cash on hand. My daughter called me last night from Seattle and said, I'm glad I left Microsoft and went to my new job, because I might have lost my job at Microsoft in the layoffs. But we see the numbers and we say, oh, look at all the people. Amazon laid off 10,000 and Microsoft laid off 18,000. They have hundreds of thousands. It's just amazing. Walmart has almost 2 million employees when you talk globally. So, they got more people working for them than a lot of states have as citizens. So, but the tech companies are having a harder time, and we're going to see some more tumult there because it's up and down, and they don't have a lot of cash on hand. The small businesses are going to have a harder time getting loans because the money's going to be tight because of the increasing interest rates that the federal bank is pushing to reduce the impact of inflation and to hold business down a little bit. The place where it's going to get held down the hardest is with the small businesses on the bottom end. Because if they can't get loans, then it's difficult for them to get supplies. And if they can't get supplies, then it's going to be difficult for them to do business. So we'll see more impact on the small businesses than we will on the major corporations. When you look at supplier capacity, you have to ask a question. Are you the dog or are you the tail? If you're the dog, what's the current agreement for output? What's the condition of tooling and raw supplies? Do you have more capacity available to run your parts? And so could you buy more and run more? Or how much more will it cost to add overtime or extra shifts if you need to increase your capacity from your supplier? So we need to look at that and see where we are with it. Are you the tail? If you're the tail, you're not wagging the dog's wagging you. What percentage of the output from your suppliers are you buying? And do they have more available capacity to sell? And do they have the capability of running more than one set of tools at a time so that you can look at getting more product from your suppliers if you need it? If you don't need it, that's fine, but you need to know what's the upside on your capacity. Short-term or longer-term needs, if you need it in the short term, you're going to pay more. If you're needing it in the longer term, now's the time to invest and buy more capacity so that you will have that capacity when you need it. Well, Chet, the markets are going up and down. We don't know whether we're going to need it or not. Okay, you don't commit to buy it today, but you need to know what the top end is so that when the time comes, you have an answer. So where's your inventory? Thought I was going to skip this one. The end of 2022, you had an inventory plan. Did you end on plan, below plan, higher than plan? It was always at the end of the year that my boss would come around and say, I remember you said, and the number is, that's not the same number. So what's your balance of mismatched parts in your purchased inventory versus finished goods on the shelf? A lot of times when we're running lot sizes in through purchasing, we're buying and we get up with mismatched parts. We have a purchase order quantity of 10,000 parts, but we make that product in 1,000-piece lots. And so we made 3 lots and we don't need any more. So we got 7,000 pieces sitting there from the purchase lot, and they don't have any other parts so that we can convert them into finished goods without buying more product. And so how do we manage? Look at those mismatched parts in your inventory and how does that satisfy, or how does that work against how many finished goods do you have on the shelf? If you've got finished goods on the shelf, they're saleable. And they may not be selling today, but they're saleable. Those unbalanced, mismatched parts that you have in your purchased inventory are not saleable, and they won't be saleable until you spend more money. So look at that and think about that as you plan your inventories for this year and as you move forward. Look at that number and see if you can get that number back in balance. Taiwan increased its shipment of chips by more than 18% in 2022. That alleviated a lot of pressure on chips, ICs, for all of the various circuit-driven equipment that we use and buy. So that was good, and they are the #1 provider of ICs worldwide. Will they continue to increase or will they drop back? They did it on the backs of their employees. Will those employees be able to deliver more again? And you remember we were talking about this at the beginning of last year, and it takes 2 to 3 years to bring a new chip plant online. So there are several chip plants being built around the world. How many of those are going to come online this year? And that's a big question. If more of them come online, we'll see a reduction in the cost of chips on the marketplace, but we'll also see with larger supply, we should be able to see more end items hitting the sales shelves. So what's my outlook? My outlook is positive. I think that this could be a really good year for most of us. So look forward, see what's out there, and think about how are you going to deal with a positive year? How are you going to do with a growth year? Keep that short year in your back pocket, but I think it's going to be a long year. We had some questions, some new ideas and issues. Transportation increasing, the impact on manufacturing goods. Transportation increase, they're not increasing their fees. They're coming down. Is that going to hit the final price in the market? Yeah, it'll hit the cost line, but I don't know that it'll hit the price line. Trends for 2023, I think we covered some of those. There'll be more, but that's next month. Transportation fee and the final price. We talked about electrical vehicles in the future. Hey, that depends on how many more millions of shares Elon Musk sells to keep Twitter afloat. He is. I think they need to cut their ties to him, and just Twitter needs to put on their big boy pants and go face the market. Electrical vehicles all together. There are a lot of naysayers, but we're going to be spending a lot of money in the short term putting in more charging stations. So I think that they're here to stay until they're replaced with solar panels on the roof so that you can charge your car as you drive. Inflation sectors with the greatest impact: eggs. Eggs cost me a lot more for my breakfast these days. How else will inflation affect mortgage loans? It isn't inflation that affects your mortgage loans. It's the mortgage lending rate, and that's based on the Federal Reserve bank rate. And that rate will go up probably one, maybe two more times, and then I think you'll see it level out. They may level out after one, but I think we'll see at least one more. Port delays, current status, I checked that this morning. LA has it's 1 day till you get to a dock. The longest port with delays in the US is Oakland, California, and they've had some issues with labor and labor unrest, and they've had some technical issues, but they're looking right now at 12 days delay. Demand-driven MRP is out there. You can find it. You can talk to your ASCM chapter, and they will talk to you about demand-driven. Staffing issues, yeah. We're going to have, this is the 10 million jobs that are open, right? And they're still there. Disadvantages of inflation, it's going to cost us more for less. Nearshoring, everybody talks about nearshoring. How much equipment have you seen in your company that was in a plant in China that is now being moved into a plant either in the US or in Mexico or in Canada? Everybody talks about it, but nobody does a lot about it. It's sort of like the weather. How long would it take for Europe and the US to be independent from China production? We may find out. Are there things that would be hurt? Yes. Overall, it would take time for that to happen because you're talking about huge amounts of trade. And trade is in multiple directions: raw materials, partially built things, and you've got all of the various markets. It's not a simple answer. Job market outlook in our area, there are jobs, and we have a very, very low. When I moved to El Paso in 1984, they said that the normal unemployment rate was somewhere between 8 and 10%. And for years, that was true. Now we're down at about 2.5%. So there's still jobs out there. Now, are they the jobs you're looking for? And is it your dream job? Don't know. But there are jobs out there. And then hybrid office impact and a new COVID wave impact, it's hard to say. There are a lot of companies that are doing hybrid. I do hybrid basically on a daily basis, but I also do face-to-face. So anyway, those are your ideas. Keep them coming. Ask questions. You can send them to me anytime, and I'd be more than happy to include them in next month's presentation, or if you need an answer quicker than that, send me the question. I'll see if I can get you an answer short term. Have a great week, a great month. And don't forget, we had some people. Paloma Rincon, congratulations to Paloma. She finished up, she headed up our class here at the end of the year, and she took the test and got her CSCP. Outstanding. We had a large number of people last year who got certified. We got a bunch more that are going to get certified. Don't miss the boat. If you haven't started your certification training and education, get started this year. The market out there is still huge, and they're looking for people that are certified. So get your degree. If you're in college, get your degree. Once you get your degree, get certified. And if you can do both at the same time, feel free. That's it for me. I'm out of here today. I hope everybody has a good month, and I look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you, Deanna.
Chet.
Thank you, Chet.
Thank you, Chet.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all for joining us. Bon appetit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Chet.
Thank
Let
you.
me stop.